Greetings and welcome to Service Scholars Academy. Today we are going to be focusing on Geography O level, and don't forget to also follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Instagram page, and also as well as our Facebook. And if you need information and need in-person tutorials and audio lessons, you can contact us on the numbers appearing on your screen. So our lesson today is going to be on air masses. We're going to start on air masses. So the first objective we are going to look at is describing an air mass. So you can be asked a question to say describe an air mass. Now an air mass is a large body of air with uniform temperature, humidity, and pressure extending horizontally for hundreds to thousands of kilometers. It forms when air stagnates over a region, acquiring the characteristics of the underlying surface, such as the ocean or land. Air masses are classified based on their source region, that is continental or maritime, and temperature, that is tropical, polar, or arctic. When air masses move, they influence weather patterns, often bringing specific conditions like cold, dry air or warm, moist air to new regions. So when air masses move, they influence weather patterns, often bringing specific conditions like cold, dry air or warm, moist air to the new region. Now, you can be asked again to classify air masses. So on describing an air masses, this is the overall information that you need to put. You need to highlight that it's a large body or it's a volume of air with uniform temperature. This is first keyword. Humidity, second keyword, and pressure, the third keyword, and it extends horizontally for hundreds to thousands of kilometers. So, and also it gets its characteristics from the region in which it is stagnated. If it is ocean, if it is land, it gets the underlying surface characteristics. And the air mass again, it's classified based on their source region, that is continental or maritime. When we say continental, they are originating from the land, and when we say maritime, they are originating from the ocean. Then we have temperature. So temperature, we have the tropicals originating from the tropics, we have the polar originating from the polar regions, and we have the arctic originating from arctic regions. So when these air masses move, right, with the source region where they have acquired their characteristics, when they move, they influence weather patterns, often bringing conditions like cold, dry air or warm, moist air to the new regions that they would have moved to. So the classification of air masses now comes into play. Classify air masses. So air masses are classified based on their source region and the characteristics they acquire from that region, primarily focusing on moisture content and temperature. The classification system uses two main criteria, that is moisture, which we incorporate continental or maritime, and temperature, which incorporates tropical, polar, arctic, or equatorial. So moisture content, when we're dealing with the moisture content, we are saying we have continental and we have the maritime. So these air masses from the continental form over land and are typically dry. And then the maritime, these are forming over oceans. That is maritime air masses that usually are moist. So they are forming over oceans. The maritime air masses are usually moist, and they are usually moist. Then temperature. So tropical, we have the tropical, remember in our classification, tropical. So when air masses, these are warm air masses that develop in low latitude regions, usually near the equator. Then polar, cold air masses that originate in higher latitude regions, that is closer to the poles. That is the North Pole and the South Pole. Then we have the Arctic. These are the extremely cold air masses that form in the Arctic region. Then equatorial, very warm and humid air masses that form near the equator. So now we have discussed their source region and the characteristics that they carry. Now when we have the moisture content, when we are classifying them according to moisture, you have to highlight that if it is continental, you then highlight where it is originating from, that is overland, and their characteristics, which is typically dry. And then when you are dealing with the maritime, we are saying they are forming over oceans, and the maritime are usually moist because they are forming over oceans, which is water bodies. Then these ones, they are usually dry because they are forming over land. Then when it comes to temperature, we are dealing with different areas like the tropics, the polar regions, the Arctic regions, and equatorial regions. Then classifying our air masses, combining the moisture and the temperature. So the combination of the moisture and temperature characteristics leads to the following classification. So when we combine moisture and temperature, we can come up with different air masses. So we have the continental Arctic. So the continental Arctic, these are extremely cold and dry, and they are originating from the Arctic regions. And remember, if it's continental, they are originating from the land. Then continental polar, these are cold and dry, forming over northern or land masses. So they are cold and dry, forming over northern land masses. Then continental tropical, we have, these are hot and dry, then they develop over deserts and other hot land areas. Then we have the maritime polar. These are cold, dry, these are cold and moist, forming over cold ocean waters. Then we have the maritime tropical air mass. These are warm and moist, originating over warm ocean waters. Then we have the maritime equatorial. These are very warm and humid, forming over equatorial ocean regions. So the influence of these air masses on weather. So air masses significantly impact the local weather conditions where they move, when they move into new regions. So for example, a maritime tropical air mass may bring humid, rainy weather, while a continental polar air mass may lead to cold, dry conditions. So the interactions between different air masses often leads to the formation of weather fronts, which can cause storms and other significant weather events. So in our next topic, in our next objective, we are going to describe types of air masses and their characteristics. So in this lesson, what you need to come to understand is that air masses significantly impact local weather conditions when they move into new regions. For example, that the maritime tropical air mass may bring humid, rainy weather conditions, whilst the continental polar air mass may lead to cold, dry conditions. And we have the continental Arctic, continental polar, continental tropical, maritime polar, maritime tropical, and the maritime equatorial when we have combined moisture and temperature characteristics in terms of classifying our air masses. And when we are dealing with moisture content, we have the continental air mass and we have the maritime air mass. And then when we are dealing with temperature, we have the tropical air mass, the polar air mass, the Arctic air mass, and the equatorial air mass. And in conclusion, an air mass is a large body of air with uniform temperature, humidity, and pressure, and they extend horizontally for hundreds to thousands of kilometers. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.